Aloha! This is Trinidad the Island Man, your Island Man, coming to you live once again from beautiful Hawaii here on the island of Oahu, bringing you, yes you, the best movie reviews on the entire island of Oahu. And let me just say, last night I finally got around to watching a movie that I've been waiting for quite some time, that dropped on the ESPN network. You know, you can sign up for it, I guess, online. Or you can go ahead and you can sign up with Disney Plus through a package to where you get Disney Plus, Hulu, and the ESPN network. So that when sports do start up again, you can go ahead and start watching those regularly, along with all your other shows. And that, I think, was, it varies per place, but they had a special for about $12.99. You get all three of those, when you subscribe. So, if you're into sports and looking forward to that starting back up, and you've wanted Disney Plus, and I know Hulu has a lot of great shows still, so, you might as well go ahead and check it out if that's your jam. All right. But the movie that I was looking for to watch for quite some time, since it had been announced, was the Bruce Lee documentary, Be Water. And remember our rating scale, shock a thumbs up. It's good to see, I recommend it. Shock a thumbs down. It's bad to see, it's junk, I don't recommend it. And for the new ESPN documentary of Be Water, it is ultimately a shock a thumbs down. This is directed by what feels like newcomer filmmaker Bao Nguyen. In it, he starts up, the narration through it kind of shifts from him to Bruce Lee's daughter, Shannon Lee, to even, his widow, Linda Lee. And all through it, it kind of discusses various aspects of his life, Bruce Lee's upbringing, and they try to tie that into an overall narrative, of the current social zeitgeist of Black Lives Matter, Asian Lives Matter as well. Like I said, Bao Nguyen, he's a Vietnamese, American. His parents had come here after the fall of Vietnam. So he was born and raised here in the United States. And you find himself, right at the beginning of this documentary, this film, talking about how he, as an Asian American, failed to have sufficient role models until he saw in the movies larger than life Bruce Lee. Now, I grew up with Bruce Lee, watching his movies. My father took me, I guess he loved Bruce Lee as well, and through those films I learned about Bruce Lee, and loved all of his movies, all the action, and and moved on, after his death, to many other martial artists and Asian cinema as well. That's kind of continued with me, both on the more serious side, more dramatic side, along with what would be considered back in the day, but not so politically correct now, the Hong Kong kung fu chop sake flicks, of the 70s, everything that Quentin Tarantino, loves to squish into his movies and kind of steal that kind of genre from. And so he talks about, seeing the role model in Bruce Lee. And then from that, it springboards into a girlfriend of Bruce Lee's, talking about her relationship with him, growing up as a Japanese American, talks about the internment camp for Japanese, citizens during World War II, and then kind of brushes over into all of, they showed like some Filipino communities, Chinatown, etc., saying that, there wasn't a lot of opportunities for Asian Americans or Asian immigrants in this country, stemming all the way back from, the West, Western times, where Chinese had come and worked on the railroad. And, and for those who don't know, there was a law back early in the 19th century that, early in the 20th century, during the 1900s, where immigrants from China were basically restricted, kind of what you want to see, what Trump wants to see now again, but specifically on Chinese, feeling that, they only wanted, again, the white Western culture, I guess, European perspective. And they kind of look at the Black Americans, Afro Americans, to compare the two. And and I had read some Asian authors who they had talked about Asian Americans were caught in that caught in the middle. On one respect, the black population could relate with them, saying, hey, when they were talking with Asian Americans, they was like, hey, we got to stand up for our rights. The white man's against us. But then, the blacks leave, and the white people come in for the conversation as like, hey, you Asian Americans, you're with us, you're not like them, the black population, we got to stand together against this, it's not blah, 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 and so forth and so forth. Basically, where races are pitted against one another, unfortunately, to keep this stereotype, to keep this social, racial prejudice going, essentially. And he does a fairly good job of that, Bone again. Then finally, we come into Bruce Lee's life. Raised in Hong Kong, born in San Francisco, taken back by his parents into Hong Kong, where actually I might have heard some of this, but I wasn't too familiar with. He was basically a child. Bruce Lee was basically a childhood prodigy actor as a child, in fact, as his father was into acting back in the day as well. So it seemed like he had already been kind of geared towards the family business in that respect. But due to his, as he grew into his teenage years, trouble with gangs and whatnot, and, other juvenile elements, they sent him to America, since he was an American citizen born in America in San Francisco, to get out of trouble there in Hong Kong. And through that they kind of brush over the oppression of the Hong Kong people, under British rule, and had always, China in itself was always kind of passed around from the Western powers to the invading forces of Japan during World War II, and then, of course, and then the British owning, Hong Kong for a number of significant years. I think it was like 100 years until they gave it back in the late 80s, I believe. I guess when this was made, it didn't really cover how China is kind of subverting the democracy of Hong Kong at the moment, mainland China. It doesn't get into that. That's not the focus of this. And so, we find Bruce Lee in America. Then finally, Linda and Shannon, his his widow and his daughter, begin kind of talking about Bruce Lee growing up in San Francisco, going to college, teaching martial arts, and then running into Linda and asking her out, and eventually marrying her, having children. His success on the Green Hornet, but it was always tempered by and restricted by his success being restricted by the Asian stereotype, unfortunately. And they point out specifically what you see in that movie Dragon, which I believe is excellently done. Basically, Mickey Rooney's portrayal, as, a Western man, a white man in yellow face, essentially, playing an Asian character. And that was kind of, the norm in Hollywood for many, many years. And they didn't know what to do with Bruce Lee, being such a talent, so energetic and obviously talented, both as an actor and as a martial artist, as, an action hero, teaching many of the stars and many of his breaks through some of his students like Steve McQueen, James Colburn, etc., that helped him get into the business, some other executives at Warner Brothers, etc. And they talk about, just as in Dragon, that movie, how it really disappointed and hurt him after, the Green Hornet, where he played Kato, was canceled due to low ratings. It was ahead of its time, that show. Basically, Batman was of the 66 era, 1966, was a funny comedic show. The Green Hornet, if you look back on it, they show it sometimes on Nickelodeon or MeTV or whatever they call it now, the old shows. Then it was a far more darker, as dark as it could be for a show from the 60s, and a much more serious tone. There was some aspects of comedy, a joke, a line here and there, but nothing like, ha ha ha, Batman, which I think threw the audience off expecting something similar, even so much as a crossover with the Green Hornet, Kato, and Batman and Robin, where they were still pretty much the straight men to the jokey corniness and campiness of the Batman and Robin show back then. But I digress on that. And having pitched the idea for Kung Fu and then not getting the part, basically drove him back to Hong Kong, where he, broke out, as a Chinese superstar, bursting the box office there in his movies, starting with The Big Boss, followed by Fists of Fury, and then finally, his quintessential The Game of Death, and of course before that, Enter the Dragon, a full Hollywood production. Linda Lee and Shannon Lee, they do a good job talking about, it's heartfelt that they're talking about his father, or, her father, her husband. But, and his philosophy that he drew from Wing Chun, taught by Ip Man, and, into what he developed into Jeet Kune Do, and how that shaped all of his life and his philosophy on life. And that's, where they get that famous quote from, be fluid in life, water, you cannot grab water, you cannot grasp it, punch it, and it moves around your fist. You should be like water. You should be flexible and fluid, changing to fit the needs of the moment, essentially. And in a fighting philosophy, that is always good, sound judgment. As people say, the famous quote is, "No battle plan survives first contact with the enemy." And therefore, you cannot, you cannot fix your mind on, I'm only going to do this in a fight. This, and this. You have to react. You have to change things in your life. And he, taking that philosophy of be like water, Bruce Lee went to Hong Kong. He made movies his way there in Hong Kong and broke into Western Hollywood that way and became a world superstar because of it. Unfortunately, cut short by his death. So that is essentially the film. Again, it is overall a shock, a thumbs down. It doesn't really bring to light anything new about Bruce Lee's death. I know Shannon Lee, it's nice to hear her speaking. The daughter, honestly, I didn't even know he had a daughter for the longest time. Brandon kind of taking the spotlight up until his death. And then Linda Lee kind of leaving, that life behind her after her husband's death. So it is interesting to hear their perspectives on her, on their father, on her husband, Linda's husband, Bruce Lee. But other than that, it doesn't give any solid insight. And it feels kind of forced to be put into the entire Black Lives kind of movement that is moving on right now. It's like, yes, it fits, but it just feels like they kind of stuffed it in there kind of last minute. It doesn't feel like they reached those conclusions, and it's like they didn't approach it initially. I think that kind of, the protests happened, the Black Lives Movement took off, and then kind of in the editing, I think Bo, again, it feels like that to me, kind of said, okay, this is the focus we should take with this footage that we have and that we've already shot, and we'll gear it towards that, that the world needs to be more inclusive to everyone, essentially, which is a good message overall. But as far as wanting to get into the meat, and solidness of Bruce Lee's life and gain extra insight from other than what his movies had shown, what maybe his past writing had shown, his books, what limited interviews still exist. This still comes out just feeling a little less than it could have been, and therefore the shock, a thumbs down for it. If you are a hardcore Bruce Lee fan, then by all means go ahead and check it out. But I wouldn't sign up just for the ESPN online video streaming service just to watch Be Water. Or I probably wouldn't even purchase the DVD when it comes out. If you can catch it on TV at some point, if it shows, it would be something interesting on the History Channel, or the Arts and Entertainment Network, or whatever is out there that would do something, show a show like this. Even the Sundance Channel, perhaps. Then catch it there when you have the chance. All right. Thank you so much. This is Trinidad, the Island Man, your Island Man, saying, unfortunately, shock and thumbs down for Be Water, the Bruce Lee documentary on the ESPN network. All right. Thank you so much, and aloha.